Another story is Wiley Reynolds. He and his partner were on patrol, and they saw a large dark shape in the water. Well, he wasn't sure if it was a U-boat or if it was a whale. So he didn't want to take any chances of it being a U-boat, so he went ahead and dropped his bomb. To this day, he didn't know if it was a U-boat or, unfortunately, a whale. After he dropped his bomb, they flew off. One of the important stories of the Civil Air Patrol and Coastal Patrol Base Number 3 and all the other Coastal Patrol units was told by none other than comic strip artist Zach Mosley. Zach Mosley was a member of Coastal Patrol 3, flew anti-submarine patrols, but he was also an artist. In 1933, he came out with the Smilin' Jack aviation comic strip that ran in the Chicago Tribune and eventually syndicated to 300 newspapers across the nation. It was through his efforts during World War II that he was able to let the public know about the efforts of the Civil Air Patrol, because not only did the CAP fly coastal patrol duties, but they also did many other vital missions to support the military and the war effort. They flew courier service, they flew target towing missions, they flew liaison patrol, which was nothing other than border patrol along the U.S.-Mexican border. Now, what he would do, he would take a lot of his characters from the people he flew with. So, in the Smiling Jack comic strip, the character Long Distance Ike, Zach took that character from their commander, Wright Vermilya. Zach always portrayed him as stern-faced and serious. And talking with some of the former members of Coastal Patrol 3, they all say that pretty much Vermilya was that way. However, I have seen a couple of photographs with him cracking just a little bit of a smile. So there must be some truth to what they were saying about how stern-faced old Vermilya was. Not only did Zach draw this comic strip, he was also a teacher. He taught his brother, Bob Mosley, how to fly. And Zach was able to get Bob to join up with the Civil Air Patrol. So both of them occasionally would actually fly anti-submarine missions between here and Cape Canaveral and back. Bob would later on go on to serve in the Army Air Corps flying combat missions in the South Pacific for the Army Air Corps. He would then get out, stay in the Army Air Force Reserve, and then during the Korean War he went back on active duty flying for the Air Force in Korea, and then he made the military a career, which also led to him flying combat missions in Vietnam. So Bob actually flew in 3 wars in his military career.
Welcome back to Inside History. You know, we try to bring you the best of our history in Palm Beach County, but we want to know what you think. If you have an idea for a show that you'd like to see, send an email at sgaraqe@pbcgov.org. Your comments make a difference to us here at Channel 20. We're now going to continue with the fascinating story of the war in Florida waters from 1942 to 1943.
So as we discussed earlier about having to crash land on the water and use the Barracuda bucket, one incident that actually happened off of Jensen Beach involved Wiley Reynolds and his observer, Ralph Cohn. They were about 15 miles off the coast when they encountered engine problems. When they figured they were too far out to make it to land, Wiley saw a small fishing boat in the water, so he circled above that boat to let them know that they were having some problems. Once he figured that the crew on the boat knew that they were having some problems, Wiley then brought it around and crash landed in the water. He said that his plane, once he landed in, they didn't flip, which was very good. They stayed upright. So they had about 8 minutes, him and Ralph, to get out of the plane and get into their safety gear. By then, the Army Air Corps had issued them life rafts. So Wiley said that Ralph stayed calm during all this, got their lifeboat out. He got in it, and then Wiley did the same thing, and they pushed away from their aircraft, which finally sank. Now, the reason Wiley said Ralph stayed calm during all this was because Ralph couldn't swim. But he stayed calm and did what he was trained to do. Now, the Civil Air Patrol had come up with an award, so to speak, for those pilots and observers that had to crash land on the water, and that was called the Duck Club Award. That was nothing more than a blue patch, a blue background, with a red duck floating in the water. So Wiley Reynolds and Ralph Cohn in 1943 were inducted into the Duck Club, and they received their patch and a letter. There was over 120 members of the Coastal Patrol units nationally that were inducted into that club. So, from March 1942 to August 1943, Coastal Patrol units would fly hundreds, if not thousands, of anti-submarine patrol missions.
Coastal Patrol 3 flew 18,712 hours of anti-submarine patrols and an estimated 1,546,500 miles in 17 months of operation. Air crews made 14 attacks, dropping 21 live bombs on suspected U-boats. The unit suffered 4 airplane crashes on land and 2 at sea.
It wasn't until August of 1943 that the Navy was fully prepared to assume the anti-submarine patrol mission. On August 31st, 1943, at sunset, all Coastal Patrol units were ordered to stand down. That meant anti-submarine patrols would end at sunset on August 31st of 1943. Here at Lantana Airport, Coastal Patrol 3 held a sunrise ceremony for that occasion, and in attendance were military officials, families, friends, local government officials, the Coastal Patrol unit, and Senator Claude Pepper. He came to the deactivation ceremony and said a few words about how great the efforts from all 5 bases in Florida were in combating the German U-boat. However, Coastal Patrol 3 didn't end then. They went on to go ahead and establish a cadet squadron here, where the cadets learned all about aerospace education. They could learn to fly. This also helped prepare those young men for service in the Army Air Corps. To get members, what they did is they bombed certain cities between here and Cape Canaveral with leaflets looking for cadets. It wouldn't be till 1948 that those members of the Civil Air Patrol that served in the Coastal Patrol flying anti-submarine patrols were finally recognized for their service. President Harry Truman authorized the Air Medal for all those Coastal Patrol members that flew 200 hours or more of anti-submarine patrol duties. War ended in 1945. It wasn't until 3 years later that they were finally recognized, which, in my opinion, was a shame. In May of 1948, they held an award ceremony at Lantana Airport, and over 200 Coastal Patrol members from Florida showed up at that award ceremony. 53 air medals alone were given to members of Coastal Patrol 3. Members flying Coastal Patrol duties were actually carrying out armed combat missions against an armed enemy.
Across the country, Civil Air Patrol Coastal Patrol units flew more than 24 million miles, spotted 173 enemy submarines, attacked 57, and are officially credited with sinking 2. They lost 90 planes and 26 brave men.
So here you had civilians conducting attacks against an enemy In 1945, members of the National Civil Air Patrol appeared before Congress trying to get those members of Coastal Patrol duties awarded the status of veteran, just like their military counterparts. But unfortunately, it was disapproved. So those members of Coastal Patrol did not receive that status of veteran. So just what is the legacy of Coastal Patrol 3? Well, the unit was established in 1942, first at Morrison Field and then to Lantana Airport. Although Coastal Patrol duties ended in August of 1943, they established a cadet squadron. Well, that cadet squadron is still in operation today at Lantana Airport. The three missions of the Civil Air Patrol today are aerospace education, search and rescue, and the cadet program. And they are also the official auxiliary of the United States Air Force. Now I have to wonder if we had the same conditions right here as they did in World War II with submarines attacking our coastline. Would civilian volunteers have that patriotic duty or sense of duty to volunteer to actually fly their own planes with bombs and actually make attacks? Would they rise to that challenge? Would they go out and make attacks? These guys were not paid except per diem. That meant when they were on duty that particular day is when they got paid. To me, those that served in the Civil Air Patrol flying Coastal Patrol duties are heroes for what they did and how they helped the military combat the U-boat menace, which finally ended in 1943 when they were withdrawn from our shores. So again, to me, they're heroes.
Well, unfortunately, that's it for today. But if you'd like to watch this again, or if you missed part of the show, just check our programming guide at pbcgov.com. You can find different times and days for the show, or you may choose to watch it online under the link for local programs. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Susanna McClellan. Take care.